This is Sarah Squires bringing you behind the headlines in today's edition of WyoToday Newsroom. Today, I am joined by senior reporter Marit Gukin. We're going to go over some of the latest stories. And, honestly, folks, we know in the news business, and I think in a lot of businesses, once we get around this holiday season, it seems like everybody kind of holds their breath and there's not a lot going on. And then it all breaks loose. And we are experiencing that right now. There is just a lot of news coming down the pike and a lot we want to fill you in on. So thank you so much for joining me this morning, Marit.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. It's always great to chat about what we've been working on.
Definitely. So I know one of the big stories that we're looking at this week is the Wyoming Supreme Court has handed down an opinion here, a ruling rejecting 2 abortion bans as unconstitutional. Now, this has been a subject that's been tied up in the courts for quite some time here. Obviously, since the fall of Roe v. Wade, we had we had a trigger ban and then another ban that were passed by the legislature, and then they were challenged through the court system as unconstitutional. And one of the central issues at play here is the 2012 amendment to the state's constitution, which at the time was kind of a pushback against the Affordable Care Act. And what it says is that people in Wyoming here have the right to make their own health care decisions. And in the Supreme Court's 4-1 decision, the state's high court found that abortion laws don't constitute, quote, reasonable and necessary restrictions on a pregnant woman's right to make her own health care decisions. Now, since this ruling came down, I think it was released on Tuesday morning, we've got a lot of responses, both from supporters of the ban and those who challenged it as well. One of the big kind of news items of the day was Governor Mark Gordon, pretty quickly after this opinion was released, expressed deep disappointment, sent out this statement, and he really strongly suggested that our legislature needs to craft a bill during the upcoming budget session, and Gordon said he would sign it, that would put another constitutional amendment on the ballot, this time one that would directly ban abortion in the state of Wyoming. So what that would trigger is a vote by, voters in the Cowboy State here on their thoughts about whether this ban should be upheld and added to the Constitution. Now, Marit, this is not the first time that this has been attempted. I mean, we have heard from some of our lawmakers here that they are interested in pursuing that. And back in 1997, this topic was put to a vote, and Wyomingites overwhelmingly supported the right to abortion here. And so it will be very interesting if we do end up having this on the ballot to see how times have changed, whether folks have different ideas about what we should codify in our Constitution when it comes to the concept of abortion, the rights of abortion, the right to life, and what folks would be thinking about that. One of the other things that we're kind of hearing too is that the Attorney General's office has formally requested to re-argue the case before the Supreme Court here. So it'll be interesting to see how this starts to pan out. Now, we sort of turn the page here to something that, I think is a pretty newsy topic that has been coming down the pike. It's not a surprise, but both Riverton and Lander have been pondering some changes to their alcohol ordinances. And so, Marit, you were at the Lander City Council meeting last night, and I was at the Riverton City Council meeting on Tuesday night as well. I lovingly refer to the Riverton City Council meeting as our slumber party that we have a couple of times a month. And it was absolutely the case last night. We were there pretty late. But city council members on a third reading approved this ordinance change. And essentially what it does is creates this like demerit style point system, which I know Lander is kind of going down a similar path as well. So what happened last night during the third reading, which passed unanimously, is that council members kind of came together and they amended the ordinance in a few different ways. So one of the things that they did was they really sort of pared down the infractions that can earn you these kind of demerit points. And so through this system, essentially, a bar, restaurant, someone who holds a liquor license, if they are convicted of a violation on this list for an alcohol infraction, they may accrue points. And so the city basically has a system now that they're putting in place here where once you reach a certain number of points, you're going to face escalating consequences. So it sort of starts with like fines, and then we move into the territory of temporary license suspension, and it goes all the way up to the point where the city could pursue revoking your liquor license in court here. Now, liquor license holders would have the ability to kind of appeal the points through an administrative hearing. The council had also kind of amended the original ordinance to put a cap on the cost of that hearing. So if you're a liquor license holder and you do make this appeal, you have a hearing and you win, you don't have to pay anything. But if you do not prevail during that administrative hearing, then the most that you would have to pay would be $250 under these new rules. So what they did last night is they kind of cut back on some of the list here of infractions that would accrue points for license holders. So one of those, a lot of these are kind of like paperworky red tape mistakes. So one of them that they took off was, properly displaying your liquor license. Another was if you fail to pay your sales tax. And it's not as though those things are not still unlawful. They certainly are. You do have to pay your sales tax, but you wouldn't accrue points under this new system. So the points are really kind of narrowly focused on things like serving alcohol to a minor, serving alcohol after hours, that kind of thing that we all sort of recognize as those kind of the big faux pas when it comes to alcohol in the city. And so it was interesting as this ordinance has moved down the pike, it's had kind of varying levels of support on the council. So during the second reading, it was more of a split vote. And last night, council members came together and made some adjustments here and all seemed to be pretty comfortable going forward with this new ordinance. Now, I think Lander started off a little bit earlier in this process. Like Lander, the city council sort of came up with this idea, but has pondered it a little bit longer. So where is Lander at with its consideration of a similar kind of ordinance, Marit?
Yeah, so Lander is moving through this process much more slowly. It has had its first reading of its version of this ordinance, and since then has held a few open houses to invite community members, business owners, but also just folks in the community who care about what's going on with our liquor laws, to come give some feedback, weigh in. There were council members taking notes at those open houses, and then last night we had a council work session where they sort of went through some of their big takeaways from those conversations. And so, Riverton has passed its version of the ordinance after 3 readings. Lander has not yet reached its second reading. So for the city of Lander, that makes, these conversations really kind of started bubbling up around this time last year. So Lander's been talking about generally concerns around making improvements to its liquor license laws for about a year now. So last night, I think one thing that's important to emphasize here, Sarah, is, the ability of the city to take its liquor licenses to district court to pursue revoking or suspending a business's license is, really the only consequences that are outlined in state statute for any kind of violations. And so, I think on the Lander side of things, there's been some strong emphasis on, what the city is really looking for is, a halfway step. So they aren't, going to have someone who maybe just had, a series of bad events or a bad year, or, they want to give folks a chance to make some changes before they're immediately moving to the step of taking them to court to revoke their license. And I think they made some changes last night. Again, it was a work session, so no official amendments or anything, but there seemed to be some broad agreement around a few changes, like, Lander's point system. They decided they're going to add in a little more grace there. They emphasized something that a lot of folks didn't realize at first, which is that they plan to offer this sort of, first time is sort of your grace, your freebie. So on the first offense for something, you won't accumulate any points for that. And then if it continues to occur and is becoming a pattern, then that is, signifies something more significant going on at the business rather than a one-time mistake by one person. And you will start to potentially accrue points. Lander has a similar system in its version of this ordinance where it would have, you accrue points, and once you hit a certain threshold, you're going to go to the city and have to have a hearing. Maybe you'll have to show them a plan for how you're going to improve what you're doing. And in Lander, if the council signs off on your plan, there was some talk about, well, does that mean that those points go away or you can reduce them by half? It was unclear if they were going to do anything like that, because it was there were some concerns about when that, when it's okay to waive points and when it's not. But from there, if you continue to accumulate points, you might move up to a 7-day suspension, or the next step beyond that would be that revocation hearing. And again, the city itself cannot suspend or revoke a liquor license holder's license. They have to take you to court, and then district court makes that decision. Mm-hmm. One of the big things Lander talked about last night was this desire to bring in a third party for those hearings for license holders who have accumulated a certain number of points. So they talked about hiring an administrative judge to serve as a third party who would conduct the hearing. City council would still have to vote to ratify that decision one way or another. And there were some concerns that, what if the council rejects the decision of that administrative judge, and, it's going to reintroduce this layer of subjectivity. But generally, the sentiment seemed to be that folks really appreciated the idea that this extra layer of objectivity would be introduced, because that was one concern a lot of license holders in Lander had as they spoke to Interim Police Chief Kelly Waugh and council members, was that, individual disputes between a business owner and a council member might influence decisions that are being made. And there seemed to be a strong sentiment on the council that paying for that third-party administrative judge, who would be an attorney, so would be, charging an attorney's rate, would be a worthwhile investment to have that extra layer of objectivity and protection for business owners. There were, other changes that they sort of wrangled their way through. And if folks are interested in a more detailed breakdown of the changes Lander is looking at, please pick up a copy of the Lander Journal, and we'll have an article in there for you to read about it.
All right. Yeah, that's definitely a complicated topic and something that is important to a lot of people here. I think, on the Riverton side of things, the conversation really was a result of some city discussions about addressing the problem of alcoholism here. So just kind of looking at the full gamut of kind of regulatory reform, or what can we do here. And I know there's concerns in Lander as well on that topic. Speaking of important topics, I know we were kind of celebrating celebrating some reporting we did in 2025 having to do with Job Corps. That was some pretty in-depth reporting, and we recently checked in. Marit, you did some reporting on what's going on at the federal level with Job Corps. What can you tell us about what's going on with that?
Yeah, so Congress is currently looking at its appropriations bill for the next fiscal year. And so, Job Corps eventually received funding from the previous fiscal year, and that pause that was going on earlier in the year got halted in the court system. But, Job Corps is not out of the weeds yet. They've got, in the current fiscal budget that is being considered, $1.7 billion worth of funding is outlined for Job Corps as a sort of, this is going to be stable to fund this program. And the House Appropriations Committee suggested cutting that to $880 million, so about in half, and only funding the top 50% of high-performing Job Corps centers based on 2023 graduation rates. Now, Job Corps supporters argue that the numbers that were in that report showing 2023 graduation rates are still really showing the impact of COVID-19 shutdowns and aren't really a fair or accurate way to represent what's going on with the program and how it's doing. Here in Riverton, we've had some really strong community opposition to the idea of shutting down Wind River Job Corps in particular, which, Mayor Tim Hancock has described it as a regional leader. Hudson Mayor Sherry Oler also, has had some wonderful praise for the Job Corps program and the work that they've done to help the town of Hudson. And we know that between the end of May, when that pause kind of went into effect, and the end of December, Job Corps graduated 71 students this year, and most of them have gone on to be employed in a trade related to, or that was what they studied at Job Corps, and they're earning over $19 per hour on average. And a lot of those kids, a number of them do come from out of state. Whenever Job Corps has some unique programs that those kids are interested in learning, but a lot of them end up staying in Wyoming, if not necessarily in Fremont County. And Wind River Job Corps has some agreements in place, we know from previous reporting, with organizations around the state to help kids get some hands-on experience, which also means, then those kids have ties to that professional community here in Wyoming. So Job Corps, that's definitely an issue to keep an eye on. The Senate version of the appropriations bill did not include that 50% cut. So those two chambers of Congress are going to have to reconcile that difference. Folks, if you have strong feelings about Wind River Job Corps and funding for it, we would encourage you, and the folks at Wind River Job Corps definitely encourage you to reach out to your congressional delegation and let them know your thoughts.
Absolutely. That is, an important topic here. I think it was a $41 million campus here. It's the nation's newest Job Corps campus that we got up on the hill, built in 2015, I believe. And it is a major employer for this region, not to mention, the valuable training that goes on there. So definitely a topic to watch. And, if you've got feedback to send up the chain to our federal delegation, absolutely, now is the time to do it. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Marit, going over these headlines, delivering on that promise to bring you behind those headlines and really kind of give you some insight here on WyoToday Newsroom.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sarah.
Today's show is brought to you by Porter's Mountain View Supply in Riverton. If grilling is part of your lifestyle, Porter's has got you covered. They carry Quality grills built for flavor, performance, and durability. Whether you are cooking for a crowd or just firing it up on the weekend, their team can help you find the grill that fits how you cook and how often you use it. And during this winter, you are probably out there every night, folks. This is the year to invest in a quality grill. Porter's also has a full lineup of grilling accessories, including pellets, charcoal, seasoning tools, thermometers, covers, and cleaning supplies. From low and slow cooking to quick and easy backyard meals, Porter's Mountain View Supply has the products that help you get better results every time. Check them out at Porter's Mountain View Supply. They're at 750 East Sunset Drive here in Riverton, or give them a call at 307-85.